How's it going, everybody, and welcome back to your favorite weekly horoscope, this time for May 10th through May 16th of 2021. My name is Cam White. Thank you guys so much for being here, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing. I love and appreciate every single one of you. I'm super excited you guys can be here with me today. We got to jump straight to it. This is the big one. This is the big week. I'm sure you saw with my thumbnail. Yeah, a lot of stuff's going down this week, so we kind of really just have to jump straight into it. So let's go ahead and pull up the chart. We start Monday off with Mercury conjoining the North Node. Now, usually in a Mercury retrograde phase, Mercury entering shadow is going to be like the time to really start paying attention, right? That's totally true, right? That I'm not denying that. However, I think because this is a Mercury retrograde really late in Gemini, because of the eclipse that's on this Mercury retrograde. If you don't know about this Mercury retrograde that we're having, make sure you check out the Mercury retrograde video I did about it so you guys are totally informed about all these transits. But I kind of talk about this, but the Mercury on the North Node, I really think is kind of like almost like a pre-shadow, like before it goes into shadow kind of moment. The nodes have been in Mercury sign for a year now. Mercury conjoining the North Node, being in its home sign, this is some, on one end with the nodes, this is a timing thing. Like, this is a moment where it's like, oh, something clicks, something happens. It's Mercury, right? A message comes across. Someone tells you something. An idea kind of clicks in your head, right? But then there's the other side of the nodes, where the nodes are an intensification of energy, where the North Node is kind of looked at as malefic. It's kind of looked at as bad. It's not necessarily looked at as always like super good. It's kind of like when you go, I think, a little bit too far, too fast. And Mercury on the North Node could be like, sometimes you're just it's like when you're too into something, like you ever see people who get too into a game. It's like, dude, it's just a game, calm down. That's kind of like Mercury conjoining the North Node on Monday. So the two ways to really look at it is like, you're really going to see something important come up on Monday that's going to be relevant for the eclipses, that's going to be relevant for the Mercury retrograde. I know it's kind of a lot going on this month. Really, this month has so much it's just like May and June. And then this month really kicks off the rest of the year. From May to September, when Mercury, from May to September, when Jupiter and Saturn go retrograde all the way to direct, is like one part. It's like a third of the year. We had like this beginning quarter, we have like this weird third, and then we have the last ending, which is like, those are the three scenes of 2021, so to say. So it really all starts off this week, and I think it really hits in this really intense moment with Mercury going on the North Node. Also, on Monday, the moon is going to be, the moon will, enter Taurus a little bit later on Sunday night, go into Taurus. The moon's going to first sextile Mars, and then it's going to conjoin Uranus before it actually squares Saturn. So, of course, this is that little pinball effect that you kind of get when the moon transits these fixed signs. But as the moon sextiles Mars, this is what I'm kind of curious about. So I'm personally really excited for this new moon in Taurus. That was also a big deal for this week. But as, the moon is pretty much the new moon at this point. This is about Taurus, right? This is about, finding a place to feel solid, to feel grounded, right? And the problem is, the moon, this new moon is also zodiacally squaring Saturn. It's on Uranus. Like, the elephant in the room is we're trying to be grounded when we know that maybe what we're doing right now, like maybe it's kind of like the housing market right now, where there's a lot of people who are just buying because, buying the house they get because they're so right when a house gets listed, 80 people, go to put an offer on it. It's kind of like, you kind of have to jump on the moment in order to secure something. You kind of have to secure the bag, really. And with this on Uranus, with this squaring Saturn, this is kind of like it's almost a good analogy, really, is the housing market, of how if you hear these people's stories, it's like pretty much they got to have cash in hand and be ready to go at that moment to grab one. So as the moon, though, makes this sextile to Mars, with this new moon in Taurus, there's like this settling of energy, right? We're trying to get grounded. We're going, okay, this is out of our a little bit out of our comfort zone, this is different, but we're underneath the pressure to act. That's that Saturn square. And as the moon's in Taurus making the sextile to Mars on Monday, there's this kind of Mars in Cancer is like, just doing what we got to do, right? Some of us have been feeling a little bit more crabby. Mars in Cancer, maybe even a little bit insecure. Mars in Cancer is it's not that we're not doing things. It's just that we're a little bit sensitive and, fighting's a little bit more difficult and we're a little bit more emotional and more emotionally impulsive. As the moon sextiles Mars, there's this kind of like, okay, now that things are kind of settling down, I just got to go and take care of what I need to take care of. It's kind of like when you move house. If you guys know when you move house, there's a moment where you move everything in, and you could just be moving down the street. You move in your stuff, and then like half of your stuff is gone. So then you have to go and be like, you can move your stuff into your new place, but you have to go and get, maybe you have to go get some new cleaner, or you forgot to get this, or you need this, right? This is one of those moments where it's like where you're kind of getting settled, then you just need to get the necessities. Or for example, if you're buying a house, banks or usually they want stuff very last minute. They want stuff to be kind of like on call. This moon sextiling Mars is like just handling what you got to handle. It's not going to be going very fast, but just do what you got to do when you need to do it. Don't try to put too much on yourself before the new moon. But the moon's going to conjoin Uranus and square Saturn, where again there's this kind of trying to see. It's like putting an offer in on a house and being like, well, I guess we'll fucking see if this is what we're gonna get. Who knows? You're betting against the algorithms and people with millions of dollars just throwing, inflating the value of that house. So Monday is kind of a interesting day, right? There's this really big pull towards like, it's this North Node Mercury thing, right? The North Node's been in Gemini for a year now, and there's been this pull and this hunger to learn, for new information, for communication. And as Mercury conjoins that North Node, there's this kind of mental click. There's this kind of like conversation that happens. There's this message that gets across. And there's this like intensity to express that, this intensity to communicate that. And this is also where you're going to see things kind of pivot over a little bit as we start to get towards eclipse season. And with this moon coming up towards this new moon, sextiling Mars, conjoining Uranus, squaring Saturn, this is kind of like, hey, do what you need to do in order to secure this. Like, it's kind of like, if you're in the middle of buying a house and you have no idea what's going on, you're in the middle of work and you get a call like, oh, I need this paperwork or whatever, maybe your boss would be a little bit lenient to like let you go and handle your business. That's kind of like what Monday is. Monday is just really handling your business. I know I've been talking a lot about Monday, but let's go into Tuesday. This is probably going to be a really long horoscope, honestly, because this is a lot of going on and I don't want to just brush over anything. We get to this new moon in Taurus, and this is on Tuesday, of course. Now, this is where we get a little bit more settled in. This is where we get a little bit more, try to get a little bit more grounded. The one thing I wanted to point out with this new moon is that its ruler, Venus, is in Gemini. Still combust, or technically it's just underneath the beams right now, I think. But it's it's Venus in Gemini, right? There's this kind of settling into something and being stimulated by it, right? It's kind of like, if you're at a dinner and you don't know people and you're a little bit nervous, it's like after you eat and you start talking and you get a little bit more settled, you get a little bit more comfortable. That's kind of like where this new moon in Taurus is kind of at. It's like, here we are. You just put that, for example, in a settlement case. Like, let's say if you're settling out some type of court case or whatever, there's kind of that moment where, you have your, what's the word I'm looking for? Where you tell them to fuck off with their offer and you have a counter offer. And there's this moment where you kind of like send it over and you really just kind of hang out with, it's like you and your attorney or you and their person. It's just like, there's not much to do, right? This is kind of one of those moments. This is really a waiting game, but also this new moon in Taurus is like, where can you really readjust yourself? Venus and Gemini, like what's stimulating? And again, something that I've been talking about, and this is going to be a theme as we continue on, with all of this Gemini stuff squaring Neptune, there's going to be a lot of like overstimulation. The one thing I wanted to hit on with this week is pretty much identical to the week that you saw in 2020, and not identical as in the same events are going to occur, but identical as in the energy shift from 2020, when it was like, first the pandemic hit, and then everyone was like, oh, this is crazy. What are we going to do? Hopefully don't die. And then everyone was like, nature is healing, and we're baking bread. And then all of a sudden, like, it was like the whole anti-mask rally, and then George Floyd died. And then it was like the whole energy just completely shifted. It was so night and day. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was like for a moment, the pandemic wasn't even going on. And it was just like, all of the other topics that had been building up before the pandemic came right back, right? This is a similar week. I don't think we're going to see another, hopefully we don't see another death in the news, but it also wouldn't surprise me. But what I want to bring up here is this is much more of just like you're going to feel the energy shift. You're going to feel just like how last spring, all of a sudden the tides turned, especially look at your personal lives and go, what really shifted in between the moment that lockdown really started to like really the timing of the George Floyd protest. It was like this, like something shifted around that time. This is the same thing, and that new moon in Taurus I really think sets it off. But this new moon in Taurus, where are you getting grounded? Where are you getting settled? It's zodiacally squaring Jupiter and Saturn. So again, the pressure's on, and this is zodiacally, not by aspect, on top of Uranus. The pressure's on you that you can't be comfortable forever, right? You're not in a comfortable position, but you got to get as comfortable as you can. Enjoy it while it's there. You know what I mean? That's kind of like if you're at this dinner, or if you're at this table, and maybe you don't know anyone, just lightly talk about the weather, right? Do what you got to do to get through that moment. And this new moon, in my opinion, is very, I think it's pretty much when you get to the lunations in Taurus, squaring Aquarius, squaring Leo, and then we get to Scorpio, these lunations squaring Jupiter and Saturn are going to be like really kind of like serious. These are the serious lunations. So get grounded, get settled in, but just it's kind of like getting settled into a bus. You got to get comfortable for the journey that you're on for it, but you're going to be getting up soon anyway, so don't get too comfortable. Mars is also going to sextile Uranus on Tuesday, which really, I really don't think that's going to be that crazy. Like Mars in Cancer sextiling Uranus and Taurus, woo, like that doesn't sound that wild. I just wanted to bring it up because while Mars is in Cancer, being very emotionally reactionary or emotionally impulsive is what I wanted to say. As it sextiles Uranus, there's kind of like, this ability to kind of like go maybe a little bit out of your comfort zone, be able to, do things a little bit spontaneously and kind of get a win. I think also with the Mars sextile Uranus, it's just a little bit extra emphasis on that Tuesday really isn't super crazy. It's just a kind of time to see things in a different light, maybe even do things differently since it's a new moon, right? But we go into Wednesday. So, mind you, Monday's when Mercury conjoins the North Node. We'll have this kind of like premonition, so to say. We have the new moon in Taurus where we kind of get settled in. We strap on our seatbelts essentially, and we get to Wednesday. And on Wednesday, this is where we're going to have, for one, the sun's going to sextile Neptune. So just as background noise, pretty good. Like Sun and Taurus sextiling Neptune and Pisces is very like idealistic and like fun and like very like picnic energy. Nice background noise for the most part. The moon's going to enter Gemini, where it is then going to conjoin Venus on Wednesday. And also Mercury's going to trine Saturn. This looks like where, to go back to the analogy of the settlement, their person comes back. They come in the room's silent. And they lay down all of the paperwork of like, okay, this is what we've come to. We're going to do this. It's going to look like this. And cha-cha-cha-cha. Like this is a lot of Gemini stuff. Like a lot of Gemini stuff is like if you guys have ever purchased a car, which I used to sell cars, which is just a nightmare. But if you have ever purchased a car, there's a moment where after you apply for the credit or apply for the loan and you get approved, you pick the car where you get, you go through finance and you just, the paperwork and the information and the timelines you got to know, it's just going all super fast. That's what Wednesday is like. Like that new moon in Taurus is like, you just bought a house. And Wednesday is, what's funny is like usually after you buy a house, it's like it goes into escrow. Well, right, I think I don't fucking know. It goes into escrow and then you still have to do a bunch of paperwork until it's a minute to get the keys. This is the same kind of energy of it's like once a decision is made, then all of the paperwork and crap you got to deal with after it. So Wednesday looks very fast paced. Also the Sun Neptune sextile. It's kind of like when you it's so funny making a significant purchase because you don't even realize it. Like you're just like, it's like just time just goes by fast. Like you don't even realize what you're doing. Like it's all just kind of euphoric. Sun Neptune sextile. The moon goes into Gemini, where the moon are emotions, right? It's in Gemini where we're wanting to communicate more, talk more, we rationalize our emotions more. It's conjoining Venus, where there's like, ooh, this is new. Ooh, look at my new car. Look at all of these pretty buttons. Look at what's going to be settled in, right? Like look at what information is around and available to me. Let's also look at Mercury in its home sign, trining Saturn in its home sign. This is a good time, in my opinion, to sign some paperwork. Like, if you bought a car this day, I would be a little bit nervous with the eclipses coming up soon, which probably wouldn't be too big of a deal. But like Mercury trining Saturn, like this is some good paperwork day. This is a damn good paperwork day to just write some shit down and sign some things and get it notarized, all of that jazz. And so, again, Mercury's in its home sign where it has the tools available to do it. Mercury is the messenger, right? And you're literally at the UPS store or like at the Staples store. It's got the pens. It's got the fax machines. It's got the emails. It knows how to get the message across, and it's trining Saturn. Where now, the big thing here is Saturn is motionless at this point, right? Which is really important because Saturn has been direct for quite some time now. And now that Saturn has been flying through Aquarius, it's been introducing all these new responsibilities we've been taking on. It's been introduced, like think of where Aquarius is at in your chart. What responsibilities have you been taking on? What situations have you been having to, lean more towards a Saturn perspective, being more responsible, being more mature, being more disciplined. Saturn has introduced a lot of new responsibilities and honestly new titles, new authorities. That's the name of the game of Saturn. As Saturn's motionless and about to station retrograde, which happens next week, this is that moment where Saturn's kind of like, there's a moment when you buy a house. Maybe, I don't know, I've never bought in a house, but let's say when you buy a car or you just make a significant purchase, there's something that clicks in your head that just like the responsibility mode turns on. Like, when you get your first apartment or when you get your first car even, or when you get your first nice car or whatever, there's something that usually will clicks with someone where it's like, now that this is mine, now that I've taken responsibility over this personal responsibility, there's this set of like, whoa, now we have to operate differently. And this Mercury in Gemini trining Saturn is like, with great responsibility comes like great understanding or whatever. Like this is like one of those things where it's like if you're gonna get something and have a significant purchase, like realize what you're doing. Look in like in the age if you, and this is why I love you guys specifically, because you guys are on YouTube, and if you guys are on YouTube, you should understand by now that this is pretty much better than a college. There's so much better information on YouTube than there is at most universities, and it's free. Probably not going to last that long either, so I would recommend learning as much as you can. But this is one of those things where it's like in the age of the internet, if you are too lazy to like inform yourself about like certain decisions or purchases, like you're fucking yourself up. This is one of those things on Mercury on the North Node. You've done the research. You've done the homework. Mercury's trining Saturn. You're now making these long-lasting communications. In fact, the more I'm thinking about this, I might buy a better microphone during this time too, because I know my audio is not the best, and I've been wanting to change that. As like an idea of what this can look like. But again, this is where it all kind of happens really fast, right? Like I know for me, if I go and buy a microphone, which I'm getting a little excited thinking about it because I'm going to get like the one I've been wanting with like the system I've been wanting, and it's going to sound really, really good. And it's like, you know, for me personally, like, I've done the research on that, and the more I think of it, I'm like, oh, this is a good day to make a purchase for a microphone. I think that's a really good analogy. What I also wanted to bring up here too is things make sense now. With all of this air stuff, and this is why I bring up May and June starts of part of 2021 that closes out in September and October. Because when we get to September and October, I'm going to flash forward for you guys a little bit. Because again, well, this is, I just released a podcast literally last week or on Friday today, because I'm recording this on Friday. My time's all messed up. Anyway, and I think I talk a little bit about it in the podcast. I'm going to talk about it in another one too. But this making astrology predictions right now does not make any sense without the context of what is happening in the future. So let's jump to the future real quick. When we look at September, September, is it going to be mostly the beginning of October? So let's get to the end of September. Jupiter's retrograde, Saturn's retrograde, but they're getting ready to station direct. There's going to be a Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde's exactly trining Jupiter here. Jupiter will retrograde back into Aquarius, right? Mercury will be trining it as it goes retrograde. Watch. There we go. Mercury goes retrograde, trine Jupiter. Now check this out. Mercury's retrograde, right? We're watching Mercury. That's all we're doing. We have this crazy new moon in Libra. Still watching Mercury. Now, we have the Sun-Mars Cazimi, which is a really big deal. And this is at the exact opposition point of where Mars entered shadow last year. So this is going to be a big deal with the Mars retrograde of 2020. And then the next day on October 9th, if you're one of my clients, I've talked a lot about this day with a lot of people. There's a Mercury Cazimi with Mars zodiacally trining Saturn and Jupiter. Now, and this is a big moment, like a big clarity, peace deal. This is like when everything gets settled out in court type shit. And then if we move a little bit forward, Saturn stations direct. Mercury stations direct the same day as Jupiter stations direct, the same day as Mars trines Jupiter. And this is October, so September and October. So again, to kind of reiterate that, it all starts as everything's trining each other in Gemini and Aquarius. And then as everything goes through to Libra and starts to trine these bad boys and they move forward again, this is that time period I'm talking about. So it's like everything's going to really move forward again in September, October, but it all starts from this moment. Whatever information's coming in, whatever you guys are learning, whatever Mercury on the North Node, whatever you guys are really heavily pursuing and going towards. Now, we get to Thursday. We get to the big boys' day. This is the big dog's day. I gotta even make the noise for this shit because that's not the noise I wanted to make. That was super weak. I wanted this one. Jupiter enters Pisces on Thursday. In fact, Jupiter enters Pisces a little bit later in the evening. Boom, right there, just past 3:45 p.m. So before we talk about Jupiter, and by the way, this is Jupiter's day, right? Just keep that in the background. On Thursday, the moon is going to conjoin Mercury and trine Saturn. So, as the moon and Mercury are in Gemini on top of each other, trining Saturn, this is like settling into that deal. This is feeling comfortable with the ideas. This is having good dialogue. This is also a really good day to have a conversation, by the way, in my opinion. I don't think, especially because Saturn's about to station retrograde, it's like you need to say this, and there's really only so many appropriate times to have a conversation like this. And I say this, do this before on Wednesday and Thursday. Don't wait until Friday, because Friday Mercury enters shadow. Do it around here if you got to do it, right? But this moon conjoining Mercury in Gemini, this is just like you just got to say what you got to say sometimes. And while this is trining Saturn, this is being able to get that message across. This is being able to understand things and apply it into your life easily. Like this is one of those rare moments where think back to math class in high school, especially the people that struggle with math, and think about the rare times where you just it was one of those weird math things where you just got it. It just made sense. You're like, wow, this never makes sense to me, and this does. This is one of those moments. This is a lot of mental clicking. This is a lot of forward energy. This is a lot of communication. This is a lot of stimulation. This is a lot of like, going into a crowd of people and there's just like chaos going on. Don't expect to just like, when I say clarity, it's like when you go to like Vegas, right? When you go to like the Fremont Street, there's like a lot of noise going on. So you have to kind of have like tunnel vision almost in a sense to like get where you want to go, because otherwise it's just like so much going on. On Thursday, there's going to be a lot going on. It's going to be helpful to get a message across, to communicate something, and it's going to be helpful to apply that, right? Like, especially if you're learning something, this is going to be easy to be able to apply what you're learning here. I love Thursday, and Jupiter enters Pisces on Thursday. Now, what's important about Thursday is, yes, this Moon Mercury thing's going on in the background, but what's important is the context of Jupiter and Pisces on Jupiter's day. So now, number one, before we even talk about Jupiter and what Jupiter and Pisces means, we have to look at this in retrospect. We have to look at this of what Jupiter and Pisces full transit's going to be in 2022. Now, this is why I said Jupiter, like this is literally where you start to smell the bacon cooking. This is where you start to go, okay, I see what's just over that horizon, right? You're feeling things getting closer, because really this Jupiter-Neptune, it's not like it's the best transit in the world. It's a good one, in my opinion. It's definitely one of the best, I guess, that you can get. There's only so many great transits. There's going to be a Venus-Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, which is pretty much the best transit you can get. This is like the spring of 2022 is so good, and a lot of people, it's funny, in the future a lot of people are going to be like, that wasn't as good as you said, Cameron. And it's like, well, fucking, like, life literally is all about misery and pain, so it's really up to you to find that. And it's like, if you're looking for it, you're going to find it pretty easily next spring. But the thing is Jupiter enters Pisces on Thursday. This is where it clicks. This is where we go, oh, I kind of see that things maybe can be better. Here's the thing with Jupiter and Sagittarius. Think back to 2019. All of 2019, Jupiter and Sagittarius like, yeah, this is the vision. This is what things are gonna be. This is what things can look like. This is where things are growing into. And then it's like we get to the end of 2019, 2020, and that didn't work. Jupiter and Capricorn on the South Node, on Pluto, on Saturn. Then Jupiter went into Aquarius, where it was like, well, I guess we got this. Well, I guess I got, this. Now Jupiter's in Pisces, where it's like, you know what? It's Jupiter and Sag is saying, oh, I can't wait to go to this park. This park is super great. We're going to take this trail. We're going to go on this hike. We're going to check this place out. Then you get there and it's like, maybe it's a shitty weather day, or it's not as hyped up as you thought it was. And then Jupiter and Pisces is like, you know what? You're going to have fun anyway. You know what? Maybe go off the trail. You know what? Maybe you can still find that fun, but it's not going to be on this vision that you planned out. It's not going to be on this target that you had. Jupiter and Pisces is like, sometimes you just need to wander around a little bit. Jupiter and Pisces is very like, you know what? The good is there, but we have to be open to that. Jupiter has been in Saturn's sign since the end of 2019, all of 2020, the most of 2021. Jupiter's only going to be in Pisces for a short amount of time. It's going to go back into Aquarius. And you got to think, Jupiter is doing its job, which is to expand and be idealistic, but it's using Saturn's tools. So Jupiter can only be so hopeful in Aquarius. The glass could only be so full in Aquarius, versus Jupiter in Pisces is like why do I care if the Jupiter in Aquarius is like barely seeing the glass a little bit on the full side, versus Jupiter in Pisces is like, I have an unlimited water supply coming from my faucet. Why do I give a fuck about this glass of water when there's literally all this abundance of water around me, right? When I can just, maybe ask someone else for a glass of water if I need more. Jupiter in Pisces is like much more bigger picture. Like Jupiter in Sag is like, yeah, the glass is half full, everything's half full. Yeah, you know what I mean? And then Jupiter in Capricorn's like, oh, what happens when, maybe it's not like that. Maybe you don't have as much water. Jupiter in Aquarius is like, maybe it's a little bit more. Jupiter in Pisces is we're finally going to get comfortable with, I think, seeing a brighter future, pretty much. Like, And, speaking as a human being here, we all have had different experiences with COVID and lockdown, but I'm pretty sure everyone's on the same page with, after a little bit over a year, a lot of us are, it's overwhelming to be in a mindset for a year, right? Where I think a lot of people are ready for like some type of hope, some type of new promise. And I don't think that's coming this year specifically, but I think Jupiter in Pisces is like, we finally have a target date of when we're going to see that. And I'm telling you, I've been saying this since 2020. Shit's not going to get better till 2022. Not that, things aren't getting better right now. We're going to see the progress happen here, but you're only going to see what is going to come available. But this is where you're going to start feeling good. You're going to start being able to be like, okay, I see the big picture. I see what's next. I see the opportunity. You smell the food, right? When you smell that food cooking, your brain starts churning up chemicals to, turn on the processes in your gut to start digesting food, right? That's this moment. So my biggest advice too, like I literally cannot, when I'm dead ass when I say this, like dream really big. Do not play a small game at this moment. Jupiter's in its home sign. Saturn's in its home sign. Mercury's in its home sign. And then when we get to Friday, the moon will be in its home sign too, because this is a great segue. When we get to Friday, the moon's going to enter Cancer and make an immediate trine to Jupiter. And so with that moon going into Cancer, going into its home sign, this is like, we feel nourished, we feel comfortable. Mars is in Cancer still, so we're still crabby, but with the moon going into Cancer, we start to feel that nourishment, and it's trining Jupiter. That emotional nourishment, that emotional feeling that we get is going to make us feel very, like Jupiter Pisces, like finally, like I feel like I have the space to feel this way, to think this way. But what I want to say is, Jupiter's in Pisces, Jupiter's in its home sign, Moon's going to be in its home sign, Mercury's going to be in its home sign, Saturn's going to be in its home sign. Like, things are operating really well, right? Like, let's think of all of these planets were in their detriment, right? This would be very challenging to do this stuff, right? Like Saturn's in its home sign. Those disciplines that you need, that you've been wanting to take them on. This is where discipline, is natural, right? Jupiter isn't going to be in Pisces. If you want to be abundant, if you want to see things in a bigger way, and you want to have more faith in your life, like take that leap of faith. That's what Jupiter in Pisces is telling you to do, right? And Jupiter is like, yeah, dude, like you take the leap of faith. I've got you. Mercury is in Gemini, where it's like, you're not misunderstanding this. Now on Friday, Mercury's going to enter shadow, so it's not that, so you're going to come back to this, so we're going to talk about that. But Mercury's in Gemini. The message is clear. There's hardly room for confusion at this moment. Not to say that won't happen here in the future, but at this moment, by Thursday, Friday, I think there's this kind of like big picture revelation, and going like, okay, maybe it's kind of like one of those moments where it's like you understand a certain concept, but then you understand what that concept means, right? What that concept can develop into, right? You're like, oh, that makes sense. And then you're like, oh, but what is the implications of that in other areas? You're like, oh, wow, that's a bigger picture. That's kind of like what this whole energy is. This is really exciting. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, I didn't feel it. And, blah, 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 blah. It's the hard part about astrology is like, it's not even really that hard. You've got to be aware of the good and the bad. If you're literally only looking for the bad, you're going to see it. And guess what? Look around you. We live in the 21st century. The bad's very easy to find. The good is much harder to find, because the good, you can't profit off the good in the news. Anyway, but with this is very like, the good's there if you find it, and you should find it, because again, good times don't last. And this is I think a very positive transit time. Not to say that everything's going to be easy. Not everyone's going to have the perfect experience. No one's going to have a perfect experience. But this is definitely where I think that you can confidently say, I think I know what's going on a little bit more. And now that this, in my opinion, is where we can comfortably go, okay, I know what the future has for me. I know where I'm going. Once Jupiter goes a little bit forward and stations retrograde and goes back, then we're going to be doing all of this work to get ready for 2022. But this is the moment where we start dreaming of what 2022 is going to have for us, what 2023 is going to have for us, more specifically 2022. But this is where we go, okay, what's next? On Friday, the moon's going to enter Cancer, trine Jupiter. We're going to feel this emotional nourishment, and this is going to give us this kind of hope, in my opinion. And then Mercury enters shadow, where this is where, again, this whole month is Mercury oriented. But as Mercury enters shadow, this is where you got to start paying attention to what's around you, what messages are being communicated. You are going to come back to this spot. We are not done with this. Put a tab in this, save this tab, put a pin in this, whatever the analogy is. We're going to come back to this moment. And on Friday, this is where we go, okay, we're going to come back to this here a little later on in June. There's some type of message that's being communicated, some type of idea that's coming across. Think again to last spring in your personal lives. I know for a lot of people, a lot of huge things changed in their life last spring. This is kind of coming back to that in a lot of different ways, in a different way, but a similar, but it's still the same topic. But Mercury entering shadow, this really starts, where everything kind of gets zoomed in a little bit more, but nothing exact might happen on this day regarding Mercury. It's just, this is where Mercury will eventually station direct, which we'll get to later on, which I also made that Mercury retrograde video, so check that out. Woo, 35 minutes in, we're only on Saturday. Well, that's good. That's the majority of the big transits, right? This is a big week. Like, I feel like I've been ranting on it, and I feel like I haven't even expressed well enough how big of a week this is. But we get to Saturday, the moon's going to make this, sextile to Uranus and conjunction to Mars. The hard part about this is just because you feel something, that doesn't mean you're right. And what I wanted to put is here on Saturday, Mars is in conjunct to Saturn, where this is literally about like Mars and Saturn are on two completely different pages, and they're not even on the same story. So Saturn in Aquarius is like, yeah, I want to be, this is where discipline is, and this is where I have authority, and this is how I work with it. And Mars in Cancer is like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm crabby. I want to eat something right now. And that moon conjoining Mars is really highlighting that. So I think what the big thing is on May 15th, try not to be emotionally impulsive. Try not to lash out, because I think this Mars in conjunct Saturn business is kind of funky. Like, it's like you could definitely maybe fall self-sabotage or just do things slightly, different, like because again, Mars is in Cancer. It's like, maybe you've been good on your diet, but maybe you're sad, so you go and buy cookie dough and you just fucking eat that shit. That's that shit I used to do all the fucking time. I don't do that anymore, thank God. But that's kind of like the same thing here. Be careful, I think, on Saturday, but also the moon is conjoining Mars in Cancer, where this is like, what Mars in Cancer is very like, I am hangry, so or like you're stuck. It's like when you're uncomfortable. When you're uncomfortable, and it's just like last night, I couldn't get a lot of good sleep last night. I was like tossing and turning, and I feel like that's what like a lot of Mars in Cancer is, right? It's just like trying to find that comfort space, and you're not comfortable. And I think the moon conjoining Mars is, I don't necessarily think you might find temporary comfort. But in the bigger scheme, you might be a little bit uncomfortable. So on Saturday, it's kind of like maybe relish in that. Don't take it too far. But you might feel a little bit more comfortable. Just don't make emotionally impulsive decisions and actions based on that comfort, based on those emotions. Just because you feel something, that doesn't mean you're right? Your emotions tell you things, but it's about you understanding what the fuck they're telling you. Not just being like, I feel this way, so I'm gonna do that. Like, that's not how you operate in a civilized society. Anyway, we get to Sunday. Sunday's funny because the moon's really just void trining Neptune. Sure, the sun's trining Pluto, but the sun trining Pluto, like, okay, the sun will be like pretty much on Algol, but also the moon's pretty much going to be void in Cancer trining Neptune, where I think this is much more of a not do much day. Sunday's very moon in Cancer, trining Neptune. We might idealize certain situations. We might get a little bit in our heads, but not necessarily like in the fun way, but like in the, just daydreaming, thinking about other stuff. It's like the shower moments where you go over an argument again. That's kind of like what Sunday looks like. But the moon in Cancer trining Neptune too, is kind of, you might be reflecting on things in a very idealistic way. You have to think the moon in Cancer is very emotional, and trining Neptune, like this isn't like you may be seeing things better than they are, but you may be reflecting on your emotions as better than they are. And I think too with Mars in Cancer, because Mars in Cancer is going to trine Neptune eventually. And I think there's this kind of, when you get Neptune and Jupiter in Pisces, you really deal with romanticism, right? And this moon in Cancer is like really like feels that, like that's emotional, and like those emotions are going to get kind of highlighted, I think, on Sunday. But the moon's void, so it's just like you can romanticize a past situation. That doesn't mean that you should go back to it, right? And I think there's some type of connection with that, I think, on Sunday, with looking back at something, or honestly also more, not even looking back at something, more so reflecting on something emotionally, maybe looking at it in an idealistic way. But the moon we just got off this new moon. The moon's now gaining in light. I think this is like our emotions are what's kind of like this fuel, right? Once our, like, I don't know, like for you, like for most people, if your stomach hurts, you don't want to do much. But if you are nourishing yourself and you feel good, you can take that action. I think maybe on Saturday we get kind of like a stomach ache a little bit. We might want to like settle down, and then I think Sunday's about laying out, making sure we feel good for once we get to next week. Because once we get to next week is we have Venus conjoining the North Node. That's happening literally on Monday. The sun's going to enter Gemini. Eclipse season begins. So just get ready, I guess, because eclipse season is eclipse season's that shit, dude. I look at, like, you guys get it. We've all been here for a while. Mercury's going to square Neptune next week, where there's going to be some confusion. There's going to be some misunderstanding, some misinterpretations. Well, this is the thing. What's funny about Mercury squaring Neptune, and we'll talk a lot about this next week, is it's not that it's not a miscommunication. It's a misinterpretation. Like Mercury's in Gemini. The message is clear and it's direct. Sure, it's in shadow, but it's square Neptune. It's completely getting misinterpreted. So it has nothing to do with the message being wrong. And then Saturn stations retrograde next week. Again, Saturn's moving motion is basically motionless. So when you talk about this week versus this week, or this week versus next week, this week it's Mercury conjoins the North Node. We have that, that vision, that idea. New moon in Taurus. We get settled even though it's uncomfortable, even though it's different. Mercury trines Saturn. The message, it's all of the communication happens and we get things very clear, very settled. Jupiter enters Pisces. We see all the new opportunities now that we've done all this stuff. We see the big vision. Mercury enters shadow, where now we start talking about what the next few weeks or months are going to look like. And then we get to next week where Saturn stations retrograde. Responsibility kicks in. Mercury squares Neptune. Confusion sets in. The sun enters Gemini and eclipse season starts, where it's like all these, dramatic changes that life just loves to throw at us every 6 months starts to begin. So, like I said, this week starts the rest of the year. Are you ready? I don't think there's ever really... I don't think you really ever can be ready. I mean, I try to be ready. I say I am, but maybe I'm not. I don't know. Also, though, I kind of look back at the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And again, I've talked a lot about this, but dude, that was a crazy thing. Well, I'll have more thoughts on that eventually, but it's I look at the Saturn-Pluto and it's like, damn, I knew that was going to be bad. Didn't know how bad. And it's like, now I see how bad that is. And I see how good what good is actually around the corner. And for me, I don't want to waste that. I do not want to waste this good that's coming up, and I really want to cash that out. So my advice to you guys is understand that not everything's perfect, but not that this is as good as it gets. 2022 is really, really good. I think your job right now is to understand that the future does have something good in store. If you don't believe that, then you're going to miss out, I think, on a lot. But if you do believe that, if you do have that faith, if you put all of your money on black, pretty much in this case, you're going to win. So my suggestion is to trust your natural instincts, trust your faith, Saturn's in Aquarius. You know, you have the discipline and the authority to take on these challenges. Jupiter's in Pisces, where it's like, just fucking believe. Just, you don't even have to believe anything to make life work. You just gotta believe, right? That's kind of like the MO with Jupiter and Pisces. So, and with all this Gemini stuff, it's like, you know, if for the people that are into crypto or stocks, it's like those moments where, you know, your technical analysis and everything falls in the place where you go, okay, I think I see this clear. I need to buy in or I need to sell right now. This is one of those moments where it's like, okay, let's do it. Okay, okay, it all makes sense. The information is clear. What now? So I think I'm going to leave you guys off with that 45-minute fucking weekly horoscope. My weekly horoscopes used to be 15 minutes. But that was back when I wasn't as good. Anyway, I love and appreciate every single one of you guys. This week is really crazy. I hope you guys enjoy it. And with that being said, I will be seeing you guys next week.